webinar is called Defects and Effects. And before we start truly into this field, we need to define a little bit what is an effect and what is the defect. An effect is something that is natural to the IG unit, something which you can influence, but you cannot avoid. And defect is basically someone's fault. So somebody on any part of the process did something wrong. In design of an IG unit, or in, I don't know, processing and making IG unit, in choosing the glass, something have gone wrong, and it's called a defect. And in the end of each section of this webinar, I will be having a picture like this, a slide like this. So let's say finalizing what I was saying. So forgot to turn my phone off. You'll be having such slides. So for when you will review the PDF of the presentation, you may know what we were talking about. You will recall what we were talking about. And I think next week we will be finally having a website where we'll be putting the webinars for a download, the records, and we will be putting a PDF version of the presentation for you to download. Be sure I will talk to anyone about this. And without any further ado, let's jump on to the lens effect. For those of you who have been on my previous webinars, I've been touching the subject for some time already. And now I will be talking in more detail. First, you see on the right side of this picture, this is an exemplar lens effect, to say it. That means, how do you define the lens effect? It is very uniform, all around the IG unit, without any sharp edges, and the IG units, they basically do look alike with this. In the contrast, in the center of this, you are seeing the roller wave effect. You see, both of them are visual distortions, but they look completely different. So we'll be seeing a lot more pictures, but first, to properly address what you're seeing, you need to identify it. So lens effect is a very uniform. Many of the IG units should be looking alike, like one another. And the cause of this defect or effect, I wouldn't say for certain now. No, basically I wrote down effect here. So yes, it is an effect. And this lens is something natural to the IG unit. Why is that? That is because IG unit is by design a sealed structure. So inside you have a fixed amount of gas. And that amount of gas is fixed when you're producing the IG unit. So when you're making it, you're basically sealing what air it has inside, or argon. And this gas has no contact with outside atmosphere, should not have, for an IG unit to be proper. That means if you assembled your IG unit at plus 25 degrees in the production facility and a certain atmospheric pressure, and then you take it out and put it on the facade, the sun will shine and IG unit will heat up. And the gas inside the IG unit will also heat up. And what does the gas do when it heats up? It expands. And with the gas expansions, glass will be bent outwards. For a Russian climate, this is exactly the hot lens effect. So glass are bending outwards. In Russia, usually we have the very opposite of that. That is called a cold lens effect because of the cold climate. In the winter, it is cold, gas is shrinking, glass are moving closer together up to a point that in a certain IG units, they can touch each other in the center of an IG unit, creating a visible, a lot of visible defects in this central area. But we are not be talking about this now. What do we need to understand is that lens effect or glass bending is natural to because of the very IG unit construction. During the IG unit lifetime, glasses are always moving back and forth depending on the changing temperature and pressure all the time during lifetime. That's why you need a butyl to not solidify, and that's why you need your secondary sealant to be elastic to adapt to the changing form of an IG unit. If we talk about the lens, you cannot remove it completely. You can only try to minimize it. This is a great example of a lens on a grand scale. So a big IG unit with the square form, with the very reflective glass, and with the very thin outer glass. And you see the consequence of this. Very huge lens, which looking rather ugly. So what can you do to influence, to minimize this lens effect? At first, what you need to do, basically almost all of the things you need to do are going to the IG unit design stage. When you are designing, when you are thinking about sizes. Now, what can you need to do? First, decide the size of an IG unit and height to width ratio of it. The closer IG unit to a square, the bigger the lens on it. The bigger the lens you will see. The more, if your IG unit shape is like height to width ratio is 1:3 or 1:2, it is better. The lens is less visible. Second thing you need to do is to make outer glass thicker than the inner glass. Because when you're having your distortions on an IG unit, trying to roll back, sorry. Yeah, like here. If you have a glass of equal thickness, they will both bend equally. If your outer glass is thicker than the inner one, then inner glass will bend more, leaving your outer glass, thicker glass, more flat. That is one case. So size, height to width ratio, glass thickness, spacer width. The bigger the spacer, the more gas it is inside the IG unit. And the more gas inside the IG unit, the bigger the pressure difference when it heats up or cools down. So yeah, think about spacer width also. And of course, finally, it is the thing that I've taught in my very first webinar about the IG unit characteristics is the light reflection. As you may have noticed, all of the samples I have provided here are glass with a very high reflection, very highly reflective glass. And that rule will apply to everything I will be saying today. The more reflective glass you are having, the more the glass light reflection, the more distortions you might see on the facade. So the more reflective glass you will be having on the facade, the more care should be taken by you in order to make it right. I'm not saying that highly reflective glass is always bad. No way. You just need to be more careful around it in the stage of design, in the stage of IG unit production, tempering, and everything else. Because one wrong decision can ruin the look of your building up to a point of this. Yeah. Okay, we have a question in this section. Should we reduce or increase the size of the spacer? Very good question. Very good one. You should balance it. I will be discussing it in detail when we will be talking about, we're having webinars about IG unit, how to design an IG unit. We will be having a detailed talk about it. Now I would say that you need to find a balanced option. That is because there is a lot more than just distortions you have to take into account. First, for the hot climates, it's much easier to choose a proper spacer, depending on the size of an IG unit, because you don't have negative temperatures. So the IG unit doesn't do like this, bend inwards and the glass touching each other. So for a Russian climate, I would say go for a wider spacer. In your climate, I would say you have to balance your option, taking into account the size of your IG unit. Remember that when you temper glass, tempered glass can have a bending of its own, which is regulated by the standards, but 1 or 2 millimeter, it is quite natural. So when you are designing an IG unit with the size of, let's say, 2 meter by 4 meter, I would go for a safer option, and like 16 millimeter is fine for me. 16, 14, but no less. No. So it depends. When we will be talking about IG unit design, I will be giving you a tables with the spacer width of my preference for the different climates, and come again next time. Sorry for saying that. I really hate to say that during a webinar, but that is a special topic which we'll be covering in the future. I've already made the presentations, but we need to do the preparatory, we need to prepare for it. So I will not be deviating too much during the course of a webinar. I hope I answered your question. Anyway, if you have any consideration about when choosing the spacer width, just feel free to contact me or our technical department. We can help you in this matter without any problem. I hope I answered this one. Okay. Thank you for asking questions. Again, this shows me gives me a feedback. So yeah, light reflection, lens effect, created by, affected by. Now that basically underlies what I was saying. Anybody have any questions about lens distortions? Oh yeah, one more thing before I move to the questions. How to justify if the customer complains about the lens effect? What to do? First, go and take a look. Sure. Every standard Russian, every standard I know of, Russian, European, says that yes, glass in IG unit can have a bending. Yeah. But in order to measure this bending, you have to uninstall IG unit, put it into controlled climatic conditions for at least 4 hours, put it vertically, and then, only then, you may measure the glass bending. That means putting the glass out of those climatic conditions where you saw the lens. And that requires quite some work. So to everyone who is complaining about lens, you need to understand how to explain that yes, unfortunately, this is an effect caused by the very nature of an IG unit construction and not a defect. How? Okay. Great faction. Oh, sorry. This evening I've been talking all day, so I may be puzzling sometimes. The question is, how can wind load affect this thing? Usually not by a lot. You know, if you have slight wind, just normal breeze or something when you're not even noticing it usually, then it will not affect glass in very much. If you have a strong wind, now a really strong one, which can affect the glass bending, that means you have a very windy conditions, and in this case, you will not be looking how your facade would look like. And if we are calculating a wind load, usually the calculations are gone in the extreme conditions, like a hurricane or something which is happening like once around 50 years. So answering your question, usually wind doesn't affect lens effect, this lens a lot, because usually wind is not strong enough. If we are thinking about the look of your window, the facade, climatic loads, meaning change of the temperature and pressure, affecting it much more in this way. And again, I will be repeating myself, we will be dealing with the loads in detail in the section how to design an IG unit. So yeah, I also hope I answered your question in this regard. Okay, one more. Hello, I have a question. Hello. Is correct to use capillary tube the condition? Aha, okay. Is it correct to use capillary tube in the edge unit to regulate the climatic conduction and pressure changes? What you are talking about, I believe, is you are talking about climatic valve. So some kind of valve, which if you have too much pressure, will open up, draw the pressure, excessive pressure out, and then close. Yes. This is quite possible, but this thing is usually used if you manufacture wind load like at the sea level, or manufacture your IG units at the sea level, and then transport it up in the mountain, where the atmospheric pressure is completely different. The atmospheric pressure is lower, meaning your IG unit will be already having a lens effect by default. There you can use this valve. But these valves are designed to be used one time, meaning they should not constantly transmit air in and out. That would be a defect, because with the incoming air, there comes a water. And if water is going inside of IG unit and it is absorbed by molecular sieve, but molecular sieve have its own water absorbing capacity. When this capacity is out, your IG water will start to show up on the glass. So for a one-time, yeah, sure, they can be used for a one-time action. If you're thinking, talking about constant exchange, no. They should not work like that. IG unit should be sealed, and you need to affect the lens by carefully designing the size and IG unit formula of an IG unit. Now I hope I answered the question. If I missed something, just let me know, or just let me know so I can rephrase or maybe answer in more detail if that is possible. Okay. I think we're done with this part. Let's move on to the tempering. Now, tempering we'll be discussing in detail next week. This week we will be talking about it roughly around. And in order to understand what is happening, why do we have some kind of distortions from tempering, we need to understand, I'll be moving to the previous picture, one important part. Sorry, I have a little bit trouble with my mouse wheel, that's why mouse is too old. So, what do we have in tempering? We have heating section in the tempering furnace, and we have a cooling section. The thing is that in the tempering section, glass is heated up to a point where it loses its elasticity. Under normal conditions, glass is a completely elastic material. We have a glass, we bend it with some force. When we remove the force, glass will return to exactly the same shape it was before. Now, if we heat up glass up to a temperature of around 560 degrees, this is called a transition temperature or transition point. At this temperature, glass stops being elastic and starts to remember the deformations we have put to it. It starts to remember the deformations. But we need to heat the glass even more, because if we want the glass to survive cooling, we need to heat it up to at least 635 degrees centigrade. See the difference, yeah? This is way above the softening point, the transition temperature. And that is the cause for a problem. Because if we heat the glass, okay, the more we heat the glass, the more it will be deformed. In the tempering furnace, glass is constantly moving back and forth on the ceramic rollers in the heating section. If we heat the glass too much, glass starts to bend in the form of these rollers, creating a roller wave effect. Now you can see it right here. The roller waves are positioned like this. Here in the reflection, you're seeing it quite clearly. The question is it a defect or an effect? And here it can be both. It is regulated by the standard. Now, before we go to drawing a line between defect and effect, let's talk a little bit more. So, in order to maximally avoid this roller wave, we have to go for a thicker glass with the bigger thickness, because the thin glass reaches the temperature very quickly. The temperature when you should put it into the cooling section. For 4mm glass, 5 seconds is the difference between normal heated glass or overheated glass. Think of this, only 5 seconds, just that. For 10mm glass, 10 seconds is not really a great timing. 10 seconds is okay, overheating glass by 10 seconds is no problem. The thing is, if you overheat the glass, you get the roller wave. If you underheat, if not heat enough your glass, it will break in the cooling chamber. So if you're tempering the glass, you're also always in this dilemma. If you overheat it too much, the customer will be unhappy. If you underheat it, you will break the whole table of glass, and then comes the boss and gives you for that. In my opinion, 4mm glass for architectural project, especially if you have a coating on it, is not suitable to be put as an outer glass. Because for architectural projects, you have a size usually bigger than 1.5 or 2 square meters area. For that, I would never advise a 4mm glass as an outside glass to be used if it is temperate. 6mm glass is far, far better. 8mm glass is almost perfect in terms of getting tempering distortions, price-wise and weight-wise. 8mm glass is almost always optimal if you're not going for a very big IG units. So, with that said, let us move further. So yeah, in order to maximally avoid roller wave, go for a thicker glass, and warn you, if you are very concerned about this, consult your IG unit manufacturer how to tell him to take special care in this case. Another thing which is very important is to properly position the glass in the tempering furnace. What do I mean by this? You should position your glass so the roller waves will be parallel to the surface, meaning horizontal. If they are horizontal, then the distortions is far less seen on the facade. Why is that? If you have that type of distortion, vertical, then when you are walking by this facade, your reflection will move. And if they are parallel, if you move by the facade, the reflection will almost doesn't change. So always tell your glass processor about where is the height and where is the width of your IG unit, so he has to position the glass properly in the furnace. Because if you hadn't told him in advance, that is not his fault. Okay. Eccentric roll, if the ceramic rollers in the furnace are not centered properly, that is also increase the roller wave effect. So, the next question is how to define between a defect and effect in the roller wave case. For example, imagine if you have the facade of your building positioned like this here. This is a facade of your building. Here you have the sun. Sun is shining. And it shines on the facade. And the way it is shown on the photo above, sorry. Struggling with my mouse. Yeah. You are seeing these distortions from outside of the building, like here. But it's the standard states that if you are looking for distortions, you should view them not in the reflected light, but in transmitted light. So in this case, you have to look for the distortions from inside the building. So for a standard indicates that in the case if you want to look for distortions, your sun should be here. And you'd have to look for distortions on the facade in the transmitted light. And in transmitted light, most of the distortions are not seen. If you are seeing distortions, glass distortions, for example, roller wave, from the inside, oh yes, then it classifies as a defect and you may go claiming. I think that was quite easy. Please, if you let me know if you missed something from my explanation in this regard. Also, if you have any additional questions, go ahead. That's about roller wave distortions. I hope it's quite clear. And then we move on. Yeah, forgot to mention. The angle at which you should be looking, which is stated by the standard, is about, you see, this is 30, okay, crap. This is 30 degrees. And let's hold it 30 degrees here. So you should be looking in this angle. So the angle between you and the glass should not be too sharp. That is the requirement of Russian standard and the European standard, which is in line, or Russian standard is in line with the European one. Now, if no questions, I think that is quite clear. Let us move on and see the edge distortion. Edge distortion is also an effect, but also it can be a defect if it's not done properly. Now, why? This edge effect is only happening on the temperate glass, yet again, and again because of the tempering process. In the tempering, glass is constantly moving back and forth on the ceramic rollers, and on the process it takes some heat from them. If it takes heat from the roller become colder, glass will become hotter. And think of this, the front side here and the back side here, they are always moving on the hotter rollers. So they are taking more heat always. Also, edges of the glass are heated through the sides, which is also increasing how the glass edges are they heated more than the central part. This is unavoidable because your furnace will always have these ceramic rollers. There are some models of the furnace which doesn't have ceramic rollers, but they're not really that much of a common ones. And they hold the glass on the air, on the compressed air, but they have a lot of troubles dealing with the very big architectural glass, big and heavy glass. So yeah, most of the furnaces will have rollers. If they have rollers, they will have edge defect, edge effect, sorry, and roller wave. Now, how to decide between whether this one is effect or defect? You have to have a ruler with a 300 millimeter, and you need to put it to the edge of your glass, right here, like this. If your glass have some bending in the edge, which is more than stated in the standard, go ahead. This is clearly a defect. That is how to decide between effect and defect. Now, what else is here? What to consider for the tempering? The shorter these distortions are on the edges, the better your tempering is. Yes, when they are very short, they are looking very sharp, but they usually hide themselves behind the frame, aluminum frame. If you have a structural glazing, you will have a structural sieve nearby, so also quite good. And of course, on this picture, with these edge distortions, you also can see the roller waves. Again, the more reflective your glass is, the more you see. Okay, I think we're done with an edge thing. And now we are moving to the proper tempering defects. which are defects without any discussion. How do you need, if you're tempering your glass properly, you need to heat it properly. And the proper heated glass in the tempering furnace is lying flat. It should not bend a lot. Like, it should not be like this or like this or any other configuration. Some of them you might see. Now, this is on the left, this is a kind of an extreme one. If the glass bends too much in the heating, that means there is some problem, either with the furnace or with the operator. I'm not talking about the bending in the end. I mean, for the final product. The final product can be absolutely flat. But I'm talking about how the glass moving in the heating section. And all of this glass bending in the heating chamber can cause you these type of defects. First, central distortions. 1 or 2, or in the very rare cases, even 3. To give you an idea, I'll just take a sheet of paper and bend it in the center. It remembers, and on the facade, you will see this type of distortion. So it goes in the central part, and it is very sharp. This one is shown in the picture in the center. The same if you get 2 of them, even worse. So these is the signs of a bad tempering, improper tempering regime. And these, if you see this on the facade, you can go claiming. Again, these distortions are exactly on the central axis. They are very sharp in reflection. And by the way, I think you will easily see them from inside also, because these faults are seen very clearly. Go claiming. If your glass moves too much on its belly, on the central part has a lot of friction with the rollers. And if it has a lot of friction with the rollers, you will have a white haze on the final product. Like this. It looking whitish, like powder, a little bit powdered or having too much friction. White haze in the central part. Sometimes it will not be straight, it will be bent to some degree. But this is also a sign that your glass was not tempered properly enough. Again, go claiming. If you are a glass processor, if you see this, A, correct your tempering regime, and B, use some polishing powder to polish it up. You will remove it completely. And the customer and you will be more than satisfied with the result. So a win-win situation. Now, these are examples of a clear tempering defect, which you might see on the facade sometimes. This is again the final slide underlying what I was saying. Does anybody have any questions up to this point? If not, then we may move on, because we have one final piece left, and that is anisotropy. Now, any questions about the tempering? If you do, just type yes, and we will wait for a little bit more. Okay, if none, then let's go. Anisotropy or iridescence. And this is also, I will say it in advance, this is an effect also. Why so? Well, primarily because every standard, American, British, German, European, Russian, Australian, you name it, states that iridescence or anisotropy or these colored stripes, colored dots, they are definitely not a defect of a glass or an IG unit. I have a question. Question, how do we differentiate the local distortion images on the glass compared with the lens effect? Quite simple. I'll show you now. Unfortunately, I had pictures of this taken from a real project, but unfortunately, I was not able to find them. For example, see it here. This is a lens distortion, yeah? Again, it is almost even around the glass. If you will be having lens distortion for improper tempering, then distortion will be located here and have this form. Very thin, very sharp. It will be very sharp. Like if you will be walking nearby, then your reflection will be slightly bending with the lens, then fresh jump like this. Alternatively, it may go like this, in this direction, but again, it is very sharp, so very visible. That's the difference between lens and this thing. Lens is all around the edge unit, everywhere. Glass is bent, almost uniformly bent everywhere. And these central distortions are always in the center. They are always on the axis with the tempering. And they're always very sharp, very visible. A lot of people, by the way, doesn't know about them, and mostly because they are not, they are quite a rarity these days, fortunately. So you'll not see them that often. I hope I answered the question. If not, just feel free to correct me. How can I eliminate the local haze? The question, how can I eliminate the local haze and local distortion in the tempering process? That depends a lot on your furnace type, really a lot. And the type of glass you're tempering. I have been working on a lot of tempering furnace for the last 15 years. I've seen about 20 types of tempering furnace, and I would say that it depends a lot on the conditions that you are asking. The local haze, for example, they can either caused by overheating the bottom, by improper tempering recipe, or they can be caused by the old ceramic rollers, or even new ones if they degraded. In my history, I had a case when I was working for a processor. We bought a new furnace, brand new, and the white haze started to appear one week after we launched it. So we were very surprised, but it was the ceramic rollers who were producing this defect. So I would say very broadly by modifying your tempering settings. Again, I'm always open. If you want to discuss this question with me in detail, in the end I will be showing my phone. I have a WhatsApp there. Go ahead, say hello to me, introduce yourself, and then we can discuss it either on phone or just chat, and can look at the pictures, see what kind of tempering furnace you have. That is a question cannot be answered in 2 minutes, I'm afraid. I need to know a lot more information to answer you properly. Sorry that I haven't did it now, but feel free to contact me, or just me and Nikita in this case. Okay, I hope we can help. What else? Anisotropy, yeah. So anisotropy takes the form of colored stripes or colored dots. What is the cause of this? The cause of this is the tempering process Let's first understand what does word anisotropy means. In translation from Greek, anisotropy means not even. So something is not even. I'll give you an example. For example, on my head, I have anisotropic distribution of hair. Here I don't have any, and I have a lot of hair right here in the beard. So means the hair distribution around my head is anisotropic for this regard. Not even. So what is so anisotropic in this class? And the anisotropy that we do have, anisotropy that we do have is the anisotropy of stress on the glass. When we are tempering the glass, we are heating it up, and then we are rapidly cooling it down. The most important word, rapidly, in this case. If we cool it, when it cool it down, air comes through the holes in the cooling tubes. Some parts, and the glass is just moving under it. Some parts of the glass are cooled, chilled faster than the others because of the air distribution. And that creates you anisotropic distribution on stress on the glass. This doesn't affect the physical property of the glass by a lot because you're tempered anyway. There is slightly different stress we are looking when they're talking about the ability of the glass to withstand loads. But on the surface, the stress distribution is anisotropic. So what do you have? Because of this anisotropy, you have anisotropy of the glass refraction index. And when sun is shining on the glass, this array, the solar rays will be reflected back and forth at a slightly different angle. And then they will be able to interfere with each other, producing you colorful stripes, colorful dots. Is it effect or a defect? Effect, always an effect. And actually, in some cases, quite a helpful one. Now, I believe most of you have polarized sunglass, yeah? Or if any one of you is fond of taking different types of photos, you have a photo camera with your polarized lens. Now, I don't need to explain why do you need polarized lens for those of you fans of photos, but how does this polarized lens and how does this polarized sunglass are working? Why do we need them? Basically, they are here to reduce amount of polarized light coming to your glass. You see, when the sun is shining on something reflective, say like a snow field or a sea, if your sun is shining on the sea, it is reflected in a lot of angles, producing blicks. Now, there is a property of light called polarization. And when the sunlight is reflected from something, it changes this polarization. I will not go too deep into physics. But the thing is, if you're wearing your polarized lights or polarized sunglass on, it reduces this reflection, it removes them. And when you take your polarized sunglass on and you will look on any tempered glass, you will most certainly see this. On the facade, you will see stripes. If you look on the tempered glass in your car, making back window or side window, you will see colored dots. And that makes the polarized sunglass the best way to say whether the glass was tempered or not. Easy, cheap, and very, very simple. Now, sometimes, okay, this photo was certainly taken with the polarized lens. Yeah. How do you take this kind of photos? Take your mobile phone, take out your polarized sunglass, apply a lens here and take a photo through your sunglass. You will see the polarization. You can take a photo of polarization everywhere. Now, we all understood that this effect is visible with polarized sunglass. Sometimes we see this effect with our naked eye without any glass. This is exactly the same for this kind of photo. You're seeing there's some colored stripes in the central part of each IG unit and some other stripes on the sides, which are far less visible. This is a photo I took on a project near the Moscow, in which you see anisotropy under normal light conditions without any polarization. Why does it happen? It happens because there are a lot of things which are affecting the visibility of the possible visibility of this iridescence. First one is the light conditions. If you have a lot of polarized light, like your building stays near the sea, high up in the mountain, where the polarization of light is different, or you might have a snow there. If there are a lot of reflections everywhere around, this increases the chance that you will see this picture. The angle of light, the sharper the angle of the sun to your facade, the bigger the chance you will see it. Third is the amount of temperate glass you are using for your IG unit. And for this regard, if you have outside, as an outside glass, you have a laminated glass of 2 times temperate glass, so 2 temperate glass laminated with each other. That is greatly increase your possible anisotropy effect. What else? The amount of temperate glass, light conditions, light angle. Yeah, so as always, light reflection. The more reflective your coating is, the bigger the chance you will see anisotropy. And as an advertisement, I am saying that Pilkington has a very low reflective glass. It's just so happened. Yes, we have a high reflective glass also for sure. But what I was saying, if you are planning for if you're going for a high reflective glass on your facade, you need to take into consideration a lot more factors. Yes, in the end, you will end up with a beautiful uniform facade if you do the things right with the high reflective glass. The thing which is impossible with the low light reflection, the uniformity of facade, I mean. But you need to be prepared for it. Here is the picture from inside, taken with a polarized lens. Now, the question which I was usually asked in this case, will the heat strengthening help to avoid this situation? The answer is it will help change the picture of anisotropy. The picture will change, it will be different, but it will not remove anisotropy effect whatsoever, because even on heat strengthened glass, you still have uneven stress distribution on the glass. So heat strengthening will change the picture. Can the anisotropy or iridescence be removed on temperate glass? No. No. If you want to be sure that you will have no anisotropy effect, you may go for a laminated glass as an outside glass without tempering. In this case, you need to be very sure that you will not have a thermal shock. For that, I advise you to ask for a calculation of a thermal shock, and that would be quite a difficult one. But if you want to create perfectly uniform facade, laminated glass without any tempering is very good. Mind you, not in all climates this will work. If you have a very hot, very harsh sun, then thermal shock is much more possible usually. But in Russian conditions, I have 6, 7 projects, and the big ones also in the Moscow city, the city skyscraper, where it was built with an outside glass made of laminated glass without any problem. Simple as that. And again, if somebody claiming you for that, always feel free to refer to any of the standards regarding the temperate glass from any country, from all of them, because all of them are stating, no, this thing is natural. Interesting thing is that when I was in Singapore, I once saw a facade of an Apple store with a very big glass made out of 4 or 5 10-millimeter glass, tempered, laminated all together. And on this laminated glass, I've seen anisotropy effect even under artificial light. So there was no sun, it was during the night. We have lanterns all around, so I saw it with my naked eye without any help from polarized sunglass or whatever else. That's it for anisotropy effect. And I think that's it for today. As the last I wanted to show you the picture where you have almost all of the effects combined in one. And that is a perfect exemplary example, if I can say that, how to ruin the view of your facade with the improper processing. So yeah, as you may see, you will have a roller wave which is going vertical. That's the fault of those who messed up height with width, not the processor. Now the processors have a little bit too much in the terms of edge defect, but he can really not be claimed for that because glass is very reflective. Now we have a distortions from the clamps on the facade. And finally, the installation was taken place during the winter at a minus 25 degrees centigrade. So these edge units are hellishly bent inwards. And with all the things combined, on every stage, you see this type of facade. That's what can happen.